This old guy DIY video has to do with replacing the lower ball joints on a Yukon XL 2003 2500. So a buddy of mine went to have his front end aligned, and the guys at the shop told him that the lower ball joints are shot. They said they'd be happy to do the job for $1,000. So he and I looked at some YouTube videos. He bought the parts for 70 bucks. Now he's tearing into it. He started by taking the wheel off, then he's going to take all the brake apparatus off, and then we'll use our Milwaukee 18-volt beast to take this big hub nut off, and we'll go from there. I'll attach a link to an excellent video that we watched before we started this adventure. I think that guy did as nice a job explaining it as anybody will, and we're just going to catch the highlights on this thing. We're making progress, and unlike the guys on YouTube, we decided not to take the top ball joint off. We just took the bottom one, put a jack here under that lower control arm, so the load was basically pushing up. So I left the nut on this stud and then basically beat in this position, but on this side. And just from that shock load, I had to hit it about 4 times, then the ball joint separated. So what we're going to do right now is put the press tool on, and this thing is pressed in from the bottom, so we'll be driving it from the top down, and we'll clean this up and be ready for the new ball joint. As we continue this learning by doing process, we use the jack to raise the upper control arm assembly, and then I put this thing on there, and this tool did come from O'Reilly's, and I put a 22 millimeter open end on it, and I have a 4-foot piece of pipe here, and I swung that thing out and just leaned in with my legs and walked it over to the fender well, and it just popped loose. And in addition, after screwing around with this for about 10 minutes, we went to the hot wrench. I just counted to 60. We gave it 1 minute, whacked it with a hammer about 5 times, and now the joint is falling apart. I got excited when I saw this much movement, so I took the press off. Thought I could just whack it out with a mallet. That's not working, so I'll put the press back on. We're to the point now where he can run the... There we go. He ran the press by hand until the end, and the ball joint just fell out. Go. In the name of science, I cut the boot off of this thing to see what's going on. You can see it's like a joystick for a kid's game. There's no resistance to speak of. So I suspect in the course of its life over the last 20 years, this thing has taken a heck of a beating, particularly with totally cranked keys, and it wore out the inside diameter of the socket. So the ball just has too much slop in there now, and it moves around freely. So we'll call today a victory and finish it up tomorrow when the parts get here. Thank you, Amazon. This morning, Amazon delivered the Moog fittings. So here's what we have. You see this one has the serrations on the edge. The other one did not have that. We're going to put a little bit of lithium grease on there and put it in position. And my buddy picked the right collar from the press kit, so that sits down on it. I'll put a little grease on here. Pay attention to where that Zerk fitting is. And there's a little indent in the casting over here. So he'll align that, put it in. We'll put that big press on there and be glad that that aluminum is stronger than we are. We're about halfway in, and I just took that press off because when I started it, we needed a little more length for the big screw. So I had this puck oriented that way. So basically it allows an opportunity for the ball joint to be pushed right into that flat. So now I'm going to flip this over so we have plenty of room coming up. We'll leave it sit like that. Now we'll put the bottom part of the stack back on and go for round 2. After flipping the top donut over, now every time we tighten the screw, we can see the ball joint assembly pulling up into the lower control arm. So it's all good. As we're trying to seat this ball joint, you can see the witness mark here, where this diameter is actually a little bit smaller than the diameter on the ball joint itself. So what happens is we're bottomed out on the fitting. So I don't have a washer this big. I can go to town if I need to. So our situation right now is that with the tools that came in that little kit, we're bottoming out right here on the top of the ball joint. So we're pressing against ourselves so we can't make it happen. I thought I might be able to use this washer. It's the biggest one I have here at the house, but that's not going to do it. So right now what I'm going to do is take the Milwaukee grinder, cut that washer in half. So I have 2 pieces of the donut, and then I'll slide one in on each side and see if that allows us to finish this job. Just cutting the washer in half didn't look so promising, so I knocked the ears off, one on this side, one on that side. Now I think we're going to be able to drive this thing home. So it appears that we made it. This thing is bottomed out, and we're to the point that we cannot turn this shaft anymore on the press. So having these two washers in there as spacers apparently gave us enough clearance for that ball joint to pull up. Now we're ready to put her back together. The ball joint is in place, the Zerk fitting is in place. So now we'll just take this piece, drop it down, and reassemble this whole thing. Now comes the easy part. So in the course of doing the job, this half shaft had to come out, and to get the half shaft out without removing the upper ball joint, I had to remove this little stabilizer link. So that takes a 14mm socket on the bottom. We just use a vice grip to hold onto the piece on top, and it all came out fine and went back together fine. This is what success looks like. So far he's just going by hand, but that new ball joint is going home, kind of like Happy Gilmore's ball. Get in the hole, ball. Go to your happy place. That's where this ball joint is going. We're making progress. So this is what success looks like. You see it's drawn up tight here to the casting. Key for us was these little washers that were cut in half so the ball joint could come up and not make contact with that little puck that was provided in the press kit.